friends and family members who literally have just reached the point where they won't even read a newspaper anymore. It's like, don't want to watch TV, don't want to know what's going on. It's like just too insane. It's too freaky. It's too frightening. And, and others who are just too busy. And I honor those choices, but I really think that, this old saying from Thucydides, the Greek philosopher, it really applies. He said, the bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what is before them, glory and danger alike, and yet nonetheless go out to meet it. In my article today over at HartmannReport.com, I note that, and those of you who have been longtime listeners, at least once or twice a year for the last 18 years, I have been sharing clips, little pieces from various books, but typically Milton Mayer's book. They thought they were free. He went over to Germany after World War II. He was a reporter in Chicago in the 1940s. Went over to Germany after World War II, spent a year there, got to know 10 average Germans, and did, from a baker and a guy who built streets to a college professor, and recorded their experience. And I quote extensively from his book in today's daily rant, and I'm not going to read it all on the air. If this was any day other than Friday, I probably would, but I've got a whole board full of calls. People want to jump in and do anything goes Friday, and I want to get to that. But I do want to highlight a couple of things. This was the college professor was explaining to him how Germany became fascist and the people didn't rise up, right? He said this separation of government from people, this widening of the gap, took place so gradually and so insensibly, each step disguised as a temporary emergency measure or associated with true patriotic allegiance or real social purpose. And all the crises and reforms so occupied the people that we did not see the slow motion underneath of the whole process of government growing remoter and remoter. To live in this process, he said, is absolutely not to be able to notice it. Please try to believe me, unless one has a much greater degree of political awareness, acuity, than most of us ever had an occasion to develop. Each step was so small, so inconsequential, so well explained, and on occasion regretted, that unless one were detached from the whole process from the beginning, unless one understood what the whole thing was in principle, what all these little measures that no patriotic German could resent must someday lead to, one no more saw it developing from day to day than a farmer in his field sees the corn growing. And then one day, it is over his head. And he goes on from there, and he says, you are an alarmist. You're saying that this must lead to that, but you can't prove it. He said, how do you know for sure when you don't know the end? And how do you know or even surmise the end? He said, but the one great shocking occasion when tens or hundreds of thousands will join you never comes. That's the difficulty. If the last and worst act of the whole regime had come immediately after the first and smallest, thousands, yes, millions would have been sufficiently shocked if, let us say, the gassing of the Jews in 43 had come immediately after the German firm stickers in the windows of non-Jewish shops in 33. But of course, this isn't the way it happens. In between come all the hundreds of little steps, some of them imperceptible, each of them preparing you not to be shocked by the next. And one day, too late, your principles, if you were ever sensible of them, all rush in upon you. The burden of self-deception. This is the college professor in Germany in the 1940s telling Milton Mayer this. He said, the burden of self-deception has grown too heavy. And some minor incident, in my case, it was my little boy, hardly more than a baby, saying, Jews, swine, it collapses it all at once. And you see that everything has changed, and changed completely under your nose. The world you live in, your nation, your people, it's not the world you were in at all. The forms are all there, all untouched, all reassuring, the houses, the shops, the jobs, the mealtimes, the visits, the concerts, the cinema, the holidays. But the spirit, which you never noticed because you made the lifelong mistake of identifying it with the forms, is changed. Now you live in a world of fear and hate, and the people who hate and fear do not even know it themselves. When everyone is transformed, no one is transformed. Now you live in a system which rules without responsibility even to God. And I would say, you know, for me, when Lauren Boebert and Thomas Massey tweeted out Christmas cards with their children holding AR-15s and AK-47s, that to me was, you know, like this professor's child talking about Jews to him. These are like giant red flags that the country has turned a corner that is going to be real difficult to come back from, or that we really need to come back from. And so, you know, the one difference between us and the Germans that Milton Mayer interviewed is that, as that one professor was saying, how do you know how this is going to end when you've never seen it before? Well, we now have seen it before. We have the benefit of history. We can see what happened in the Third Reich. We can see what happened in Italy in the 30s. We can see what happened in Spain right up until 74, as I recall, right up until the 70s, where you had a fascist government in Spain. We saw what happened in Chile with Pinochet. We're watching right now as it's happening in Turkey, as it's happening in the Philippines, as it's happening in India. We are watching democracies become more and more authoritarian all around the world, and former democracies that have become fully authoritarian, like Hungary and Russia. And hopefully we can learn from these lessons and share that with other people. And that's why the opening of my rant today over at HartmannReport.com is, I write today to praise bravery, your bravery, for subscribing to, reading, and sharing this newsletter, for not looking away. And I would say the same to those of you who are listening to this program live or in podcast, who are watching this program live on Free Speech TV or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or recorded on Facebook. Thank you for not looking away. This is the great work of our generation. We have to be able to confront with clear eyes this neo-fascist threat that has seized most of the Republican Party and now is trying to change voting rules, is successfully changing voting rules in state after state to guarantee that Republicans never again lose an election. That's what you call fascism. That's what you call authoritarianism. That's what you call the death of democracy. And we have to bring it back. We have to fight for this. We have to identify it. We have to call it out. And thank you so much for staying with me on this journey. It's a tough one. It requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of resilience. It requires a lot of emotional intelligence and resilience. And I hope I'm helping you build that and share that. It's a continuous, work in progress for myself and Louise and all of us who work on this program.